Monster Hunter can be a complex game with many choices you'll make on your journey. Does my armor look cool? What monster should I farm? What costume should Poogie wear? And what weapon should I marry? I'm joking, but weapon choice is one of the biggest decisions you'll make throughout your journey, and if you're somebody with limited time, maybe you don't want to test out every weapon to find out one that fits your style, or you're not even sure where to begin. Well, don't worry, that's what I'm here for. Hi, I'm Acolyte. I wouldn't say I'm a diehard fan of Monster Hunter. I got into the series with World, but didn't really like it, then played Rise and Generations Ultimate and fell in love. Went back to World and had a better time with it once I understood what I was doing. If you're new, you might be in a similar boat. Things aren't clicking for you, maybe a weapon feels clunky, the monsters are giving you a hard time, or you're starting to feel like Monster Hunter isn't your cup of tea. Well, fear not. This video should point you in a direction you'll enjoy for a weapon that fits you. Whether you spend 5 hours with it or 500 is up to you. The beauty of Monster Hunter is choice. You will never be shoehorned into a specific playstyle. You can be a jack of all trades or a weapon specialist that learns the ins and outs of one weapon. There's a lot of freedom in how you play most weapons too, so don't feel like you're forced to mimic one playstyle others do just because it's optimal or somebody told you that's the way. Saying that doesn't mean there isn't a best or intended way to play, but who cares? It's a PvE game that you can play alone or with others, but at the end of the day, you're playing this game to have fun. So don't stress about how strong a weapon is or how weak. You can clear these games with any weapon of your choice as long as you learn how to play your weapon. So before anything, if you haven't already, please just get in the game and try out whatever feels cool to you. Forget this video and any other, because at the end of the day, you only get one first playthrough of Monster Hunter, so it should be special to you and not dictated by somebody else's opinions or experiences. With that said, if you're still here and tried out the weapons but are feeling lost, then this video is for you. We'll break down each weapon's basic functions and some key things you'd be doing on each to see if anything resonates with you, and if it does, well, hopefully that's your weapon and you enjoy Monster Hunter like the rest of us. I'll try to keep this as brief and informational as possible, so bear with me. If you're curious about a specific weapon, I'll have timestamps down below so you can click to whatever section interests you and find out more about what you care to know. We'll be using low rank early game monsters specifically to avoid spoilers for new players or those still making their way through the game. So don't worry about seeing something that maybe you wanted to be surprised by. If you enjoyed this video or it helped you out, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. If you're a longtime fan, feel free to put your weapon down below and maybe sell people on what you like about it. With all that mumbo jumbo out of the way, let's get into it. Really quick, before we break down the weapons, Monster Hunter Wilds added a few new gimmicks to the entire roster of weapons for you to mess around with. We have offset attacks and focus strikes. There are also clashes where you can stick your heavy weapon against the monster and wrestle it for control, which looks both badass and ridiculous, but this isn't something you can do on command, so I won't be referencing it in detail here. Offset attacks are new moves that, if timed correctly with an incoming monster's attack, will allow you to throw them off balance and give you a new window to hit them. It's a great feature that gives many weapons a defensive option that didn't have one before aside from rolling. So while at first this won't be something you're hitting constantly, as you play and get experience with the monster's moves, it's a great way to get some new openings in. Then we have focus strikes. In Wild, there's a new gimmick that allows you to wound monsters by striking the same part over and over. This is signified by an orange damage number, and if you're in focus mode, then you can see the wounds glow red. These can also pop up after certain moves a monster does, giving you free openings to get these off. They're super useful for interrupting a monster or triggering certain things to happen for your weapon. While I won't go over them all in detail, it's something to keep in mind as it's pivotal to some weapons' game plans. I personally play the entire hunts in focus mode, but in case that's not your cup of tea, no worries. Just remember to pay attention to different colored damage numbers or when a red wound opens across a monster, and you can still profit off this new mechanic. Focus strikes are something you can use whenever, but the benefit only triggers when being used on a wound, so be mindful of that. In case I didn't touch up on your weapon's focus strike, or if it has an offset attack, you can find all this information in the play guide under weapon controls, but I will reference the ones that I feel like are pivotal to the weapon's game plan. Some of them just do things like give you a buff, or help you do certain things faster, like the hunting horn allows you to play notes after you do a focus strike so you can queue up your songs. That is important to know, but I do feel like it's something you would get better at the more you play over me telling you about it now. There are 14 weapons to get through, and it'd be wrong to start with anything but the sword and shield.
Now's our chance.
From my language, you might think the sword and shield is a very cookie cutter boring weapon, but actually this thing is so underrated. The sword and shield is a good mix of offense and defense, and what it looks like it lacks in terms of a special gimmick or a unique flavor like some other weapons, it more than makes up for it in its never-ending onslaught of moves and answers to whatever a monster throws at you. You can guard attacks, slide around a monster to reposition, and dodge out of harm's way easily. Force mounts, stun monsters, slice a monster's tail off like butter and cook it on the shield. It's not what you can do, but what can't you do with the sword and shield. This weapon truly has an answer for any situation you're in, and don't let that versatility fool you, this thing is like crack. It hits like a truck and laughs at monsters trying to return that same energy your way, on top of being extremely responsive. If you want a weapon that lets you hit buttons like crazy, but still dodge out of harm's way or block in a moment's notice, then I really recommend the sword and shield. It's a weapon I slept on initially, but something I feel like I'm addicted to and can't quit now. Your general game plan can be split into two groups, sword attacks for the damage and shield attacks to stun monsters and throw them on the ground. I always use a mix of both on my hunts, but regardless of which moves you use, you can finish them both off with a spinning reaper that has a short animation so you can react quickly or hold the input down to get out some more damage per swing. Did I mention you can slide your sword down a monster's hide while dropping from the air, or dive bombing them with your shield? Well, you can do that too, and it's as fun as it sounds. The special gimmick of the sword and shield is the ability to use items with your weapons out, so you don't have to sheath every time you need to take out a potion or antidote, which might not sound like a big deal, but it feels really nice when you're panicking mid-fight trying to heal after a massive hit. If you feel like being able to respond to any situation, then please give this weapon a go. I promise you won't be disappointed. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the Greatsword. While being somewhat versatile now, this is a one-dimensional weapon for the most part. Hit once, and hit hard when you do. The Greatsword is home to a few different playstyles, but the main focus of this weapon is to hit as hard as possible with one slash of this massive weapon. Greatsword is what the game starts you off with, after the intro cutscene, and no surprise there, as this is usually their poster boy weapon on promotional material. You might be drawn to this weapon because you like strength builds in Souls games, or maybe you're a big Berserk fan. The Guts theme plays everywhere you walk. This weapon though is nothing like the power fantasy you're probably thinking of, which becomes apparent after you swing it once. It is slow. Now, what it lacks in speed though, it more than makes up for in its power, but this isn't something I necessarily recommend for a newcomer, to be honest. That's not to say you can't play this, by all means go for it, and if you stick with it, you'll be rewarded with a very fun playstyle. The Greatsword is home to a few notorious moves. Firstly, the True Charge Slash. The move you love, but you'll never hit till you miss 1,000 of these. This is the highest damage move in your kit usually, and what you're looking for. And then, there's the Shoulder Tackle. I reference these two moves in particular because they're what you should be the most familiar with on Greatsword. The Greatsword is a powerhouse weapon that allows you to charge each hit of your combo up to make them hit harder. While good, it's probably not something you're going to get through while the monster's active and moving around. Instead, you'll spend a lot of time canceling your charges into this Shoulder Tackle to hyper armor through monster moves and skip charge levels. You can also block with the Greatsword, but historically this will shred through your sharpness, so use it sparingly. With the clash mechanic though, it's not a horrible idea to go for this if you want, as you get some free damage off. The Greatsword is also home to a hit and run playstyle where you'll run around, hit with your first strike, sheath the weapon, rinse and repeat till the monster's dead or knocked down. Then you'll go into the True Charge Slash. This is a fun weapon for those that like meaty hits and powerful moves, but it relies on you having good monster knowledge to get the most out of it, which is why I feel like maybe come back to this one later. You can totally play it if you like it, but for a newbie to Monster Hunter, I can also see this being one of the most frustrating weapons to get accustomed to. Once you do though, you'll feel like a powerhouse, charging through monster attacks, knocking them out of the air, with well-timed hits, and slicing skulls like a martial artist strikes through wood. After the Greatsword, we've got Capcom's secret but favorite child. It might not get as much promo as the Greatsword, but make no mistake, this is Capcom's baby and they're never afraid to show it. Longsword players might look at this statement and roll their eyes, but I don't even mean this in a negative context. The Longsword is just extremely powerful in most situations. It might not be as versatile as the SNS and what it brings to the table, but what it lacks in options it more than makes up for with its raw damage, great reach, and responsive gameplay. The Longsword is the counter king. This is the weapon you play to show off your mechanical prowess and great reactions to whatever a monster throws at you. For those that love the samurai fantasy and want to dance through monsters with single powerful strokes, like painting with blood, this weapon is for you. The basic gameplay of Longsword boils down to filling your spirit meter with basic attacks to then get to a powered up level with your spirit sword attacks. You can power up the weapon 3 times, from white to yellow to red. Once you're at red, this is where you're at your strongest. Everything in your kit hits harder, and ideally you want to stay in the red as long as possible or spend it on Spirit Helm Breakers, a move that allows you to jump into the air and slam into the monster, slashing a ton of times once the bar gets low. The Longsword is a lot of fun for those that like reactionary styles, taking the monster's own moves and laughing at it when it tries to hit you with a hard hit, only to counter the attack and continue your dance. It's a weapon that excels in experienced hands, as you can anticipate the moves the monster may want to do, but that doesn't mean you can't find success as a beginner. I'd argue your 2 counter options, the Foresight Slash and EI counter, may seem intimidating to use at first, but if you think of it like blocking an attack perfectly, then maybe you'll come to grips with the gameplay fast. There's a lot to say about the Longsword, such as your counters allowing you to power up a whole spirit level, or refilling your entire gauge for hitting a Foresight Slash, but like the rest of the weaponry, we'd be here all night if I explained each kit in full. While not a Longsword player myself, it's definitely harder to use than people give it credit for, but not so hard that you'd be frustrated picking it up and playing it like, say, the Greatsword in my opinion. You've got plenty of answers, plenty of choices, and most importantly, a fast-paced, powerful samurai fantasy awaiting you in Longsword.
Focus. Speed. I am speed. Speed. Faster than fast, quicker than quick.
If Cars was your favorite Pixar movie like me, then there's no other option like this. For those craving a fast-paced, high-octane gameplay where you dash around the monster so fast it has no idea you left that spot 2 minutes ago, I give you the dual blades. No doubt you've seen the clips at this point of people pulling off the iconic Levi slash from Attack on Titan on different monsters, and while that is satisfying to hit, there's more to the dual blades than just that. The dual blades are home to the fastest slashes the game has to throw at monsters, paired up with a demon mode that allows you to iframe incoming attacks with elegance and style. Once you get the hang of running face first into monster attacks, like it's a Souls game, you'll have a blast. The weapon specializes in weaving in and out of harm's way at a moment's notice, with your highest committal move now broken into 3 parts, making gameplay much more responsive than before. If you like zippy gameplay that doesn't lock you down, then by all means give these a go and you won't be disappointed. The dual blades might struggle a bit when it comes to breaking parts as fast as some other weapons, but they more than make up for that with their constant damage and ability to avoid damage thrown your way. Dual blades require good stamina management, as your goal is to build up your demon gauge with basic attacks in demon mode, then bounce out of it into arc demon mode to replenish your stamina, while reaping the benefits from demon mode, such as the dodge along with new move. Ideally you want to spend your meter to do damage in demon mode, fill it up when you're getting low in stamina, and use it up in arc demon mode till you can bounce back in. Letting the bar drain fully is the most detrimental thing you can do, so try to keep that from happening and you'll have a great time. I already know you queued up your Hiroyuki Sawano playlist, so get out there and enjoy the aggressive dual blades. What can I say about this next weapon that hasn't already been said? The one-hit king, the undefeated champ, an indomitable will to pulverize monsters in the concrete until they're 6 feet under is the hammer. The hammer is a KO specialist. In Monster Hunter, attacks that inflict stun can be noticed by a few yellow flashes when whacking a monster in the head with blunt weapons, typically such as a shield or the hammer. The hammer is the best at this because everything it does allows you to inflict that juicy stun damage as long as you hit the head of a monster. Aside from this, you might think it's a slow-moving weapon, but the hammer is actually pretty mobile, being able to spin around the battlefield like a ballerina, or quick-stepping while charging up your next big hit. You'll always be on the move until that monster is rolling around disoriented from the ass-whooping you're giving it. Your defensive option here is a quick step to move out of the way while charging up your next big swing, or an offset attack that becomes available after 2 normal hits. You can offset monsters by holding down the attack button until the timing is right. Not to mention how great it is at locking monsters down in place with the new wound mechanic to hit them and tire out a monster as you interrupt them. If you're a fan of hitting things hard and throwing them around, the hammer is going to be your best friend you're never going to look back on. Relatively simple to pick up, but a good learning curve for those new to the series. If you like heavier weapons, you can never go wrong with the hammer. For those of you that enjoy role-playing as a bard in your D&D campaigns, maybe you play one in FF14 for some reason. If you do, let me know why, I couldn't get into it. Or perhaps you just like the idea of beating monsters up with your own musical mallet. The hunting horn is here for any of your needs. A supportive weapon innately by just providing buffs as you string together the different notes to create melodies for you and other hunters nearby. Don't mistake this weapon for not packing a punch though. Hell, even by yourself this weapon is more than viable and can give you a nice quality of life other hunters might have to slot into their gear. Such as earplugs to avoid monster roars, an attack buff, or even giving yourself some sharpness back. This is a weapon that lets you play to your own tune and bring some badass melodies to boot. The songs your horn can play are different depending on the weapon itself, but there's plenty of different options to go through. Whether you want a horn more focused on offensive options or something to assist others on a hunt in multiplayer, this is the gift that keeps on giving, so while the weapon might look scary with all it's got going on, I do think it's worth checking out if it has piqued your interest. The hunting horn's gameplay revolves around using certain attacks to play notes. Once you've queued that note up in your melody, you cue the next few up on that song's music sheet and boom, you've got a new buff to play for yourself and others. Notes are symbiotic in nature, and you can use the same note for two songs. So for example, if we have a song that needs two white notes here, you can play those first, and then if the next one requires a white note, red note, and then another white note, well, you only need to input the red and white notes since at the end of one melody can serve as the beginning for another. After you've got them lined up, you even do a little jig. The hunting horn is home to a defensive option in the offset melody, but this is something you're going to have to queue up and isn't available at all times like other weapons. Still, you can just build it up while you do damage, so it's not cumbersome or anything like that. You can even put down a little echo bubble that will double up on your melodies, allowing you to do extra damage and enjoy buffs while you're in the zone. For those looking for a meaty blunt weapon with some extra juice to the playstyle, there's never a bad time to check out the hunting horn. It can be a ton of fun, daunting for sure, but if you learn your song rotations and how to string them together, you'll have a blast beating monsters to your own tune. We've been talking about so many oppressive weapons with great options for putting the hurt on monsters, and what I'm about to say next might confuse you, but as they say, the best offense is a good defense. Forget a good defense though, try impeccable. The Iron Wall, the Stalwart Warrior, the Hunter to hold the line by themselves, the Lance is your calling. Some people look at this weapon and assume it's just meant for blocking or playing safe, but you couldn't be more wrong. This isn't playing it safe, this is going blow for blow, jab for jab in the ringer. Boxing the hell out of your monster and showing it who's the real apex of the ring. The Lance is a ruthless weapon with zero downtime. You're never backing up, never running from a fight, never afraid of a move since you can block them all. Okay, maybe not that one, but you get my point. The Lance specializes at being able to ignore monster attacks, shrugging them off as if it's a Vespoid poking you while you're trying to carve or harvest materials nearby. It's tough as nails, not to mention the designs of the weapon go so hard. The Lance might seem like a boring weapon to some, as it's a relatively basic moveset, but what it might lack in a super flashy dive in the air and a million slices, it more than makes up for by being the one to hold the monster's attention with your aggressive thrusts. You have great repositioning, being able to hop around the map, high pokes for hitting monster parts out of reach for some other weapons, a trusty shield to block anything coming your way, whether it's breath attacks, heavy hits, or a ray gun of instant death flying your way. The Lance is home to one of my favorite playstyles in Monster Hunter, and it really fulfills a tanking playstyle or one of counter hits over and over and over, no matter what's being put on your plate. There's not a single monster you should fear on the Lance because they'll be fearing you instead. The gameplay revolves around triple pokes. You can do 3 high pokes in a row, 3 mid pokes, or even alternate between them. Once you get to the end of your combo, you have different options to go for. You can go for a counter hit that if timed with a monster's attack you'll get extra damage, a rapid triple poke to squeeze in more damage, and a shield that can perfectly guard or regularly block attacks coming at you. The Lance is great at responding to monster attacks, and if you feel like things are moving too fast or you want to slow the game down, this is a great weapon for controlling the pace of a hunt. You'll never have to worry about running from a monster's moves, as you can just put up your shield and sit comfy as they tire themselves out, leaving you ready to respond in kind. This weapon has my heart, so I might be a little biased, but did I forget to mention you can go jousting? What more do you need? Try the Lance, it's sick. Next up is the Lance's little brother, the loud and proud boomstick. If you want your hunts to feel like a Michael Bay movie, there's no better weapon than the Gunlance. The Gunlance, while sharing some similarities to the original, is its own thing. Instead of focusing on pokes and constant aggression, what you're doing here is very consistent damage. The Gunlance has regular moves involving just slicing through monsters, but where it differs from its brother is in that gun portion of the blade, being home to its own ammo type called shells. You can dump these at the end of moves or even just unload them into a monster raw if you want, just like a gun. There are 3 different shelling types, long, wide, and normal. Long shelling can be used from afar and typically means your wyvern fire and wormstake cannon will hit harder. Wide shelling has the least amount of shells but higher damage between each one, and normal gives you the most shells that you'll usually dump after your melee hits all at once on a monster. Your main focus with this weapon is to stick to the monster and lay on some heavy firepower. Being able to counterattack just like the lance, you can play a reactive style to what the monster does, but when you get openings, this is where you want to try to dump your shells and wormstake, a blade that'll spin inside of the monster's body for some strong, consistent hits. The easiest way to get your burst off would either be from a lunging up thrust or by firing one shell into combos that can dump both the shelling and wormstake cannon into the monster in quick succession. This weapon has a lot of moves and may take some time to get accustomed to, but it's great for those that like resource consuming playstyles. Plus, getting your ammunition back isn't annoying. You can get it by reloading from a guard or mid combo in case you're all out of ammo. Similar to the Greatsword, when you've got a wound or the monster gets knocked down, is when this weapon truly gets the chance to flourish, as you do have a lengthy burst to pull out whenever possible for big damage. The Gunlance definitely is one of the more flashy weapons in this game, up there with the Longsword for different reasons. I'd say if you're somebody that enjoys melee but would like some oomph and explosions, there's nothing quite like this one. It also just has a giant fire cannon. Did we talk about the giant fire cannon yet? Typically this move takes a while to get out and a while to recharge, so it's not something you'll be spamming, but when you do have an opening to use the wyvern fire, ooh, it feels good. Once you become accustomed to the game, in older titles there were many decorations needed to slot in for your builds to be good, and until I put the time into this weapon I can't say if that's the same, but realistically as long as you're having fun that's what matters. Plus the time to kill on this weapon isn't bad whatsoever. You'll be slamming through monsters and grilling them with wyvern fire like a late night snack. If you enjoy heavy hits and explosions, there's nothing like this anywhere else. This next weapon, where do I begin? Where do I begin? This is one of my favorites. A cool weapon that blends the ferocity of the axe with the swift strokes of a blade all in one. And if you didn't have your fill of explosions with the Gunlance, what better place to end up than the switch axe? Instead of an iron wall, you're actually blending 2 different styles of combat. One with great mobility and long reach to weave around the monster's attacks or getting close when needed, and close range fast but powerful slices to decimate a monster you come across. The switch axe comes with its own gauge, the sword meter. The sword meter is a form of energy that gets depleted as you stay in sword form along with the moves you use. By hitting a monster with this weapon, you build the gauge up, which will then kick in the amp state. This should click something in your brain like, okay, now it's time to be on the offensive. This state activates the file effect of your respective switch axe. There's power, poison, paralysis, element, exhaust, and dragon, each one doing a different thing I'll flash up on screen here. But the main takeaway is that the file effect only kicks in once you're in that amp state. It tacks on an extra hit that you'll see as a second damage number when hitting monsters, allowing you to get more juice out of your weapon, and doing 2 effects at once, even as you could have a status like paralysis on top of a paralysis file, which would in turn give you more status buildup during this amp state. Everyone has their favorite for how they like to play. For me, I really enjoy the exhaust file as it tires monsters out quickly and allows you to do KO damage to their head, but each are good in their own right. A lot of people will tell you power is the best as it gives you extra raw, but try them all out and see what you enjoy the most. At the end of the day, it's your experience and each can be enjoyable for different reasons. Aside from having 2 killer modes to swap between, the switch axe is now home to a counter in sword form and an attack to knock monsters over in axe form. If timed right, both are great defensive options to your arsenal that were lacking before and really make the weapon feel complete. Some of my favorite new additions, and if you like the idea of Longsword, I think you'd also find a lot to enjoy here as well. Not to mention the new explosion moves added for wilds. This is one of the weapons that keeps on giving the more I play it, and I can't recommend it enough. In theme with our first morphing weapon, I present to you the Charge Blade. This bad boy is a sword and shield that turns into an axe instead of an axe that turns into a sword. Moving on, the Charge Blade starts as a sword and shield that transforms itself into an axe that doubles up as a chainsaw. The Charge Blade is home to good mobility to get around the map in Sword and Shield with a decent roll, and sword strikes that allow you to slide around or even reposition mid-combo. The shield itself gives you some nice protection with the ability to guard, and guard you'll definitely want to get good with, as perfect guards will amp up your axe mode. The axe normally has a longer reach and single hit moves that go through the monster. But if you have files, this is where things can get interesting. This weapon is time in and time out regarded as one of the harder weapons to play and start with. If you're going in blind, I can 100% agree, as there's a lot going on in systems that are unique to Monster Hunter, so even though there is an in-game tutorial, this is one of those weapons that will just take some time to come to grips with. To get you started though, let me walk you through the bread and butter. As you hit things in sword mode, you'll fill up the files right here. At first, the color is the only thing that changes from white to yellow to red. When it's red, you'll notice your sword attacks bouncing off the monster. This means that it's time to dump your files into the shield. After dumping the files, you can swing your sword again as normal, but this isn't really the optimal way to play in my opinion. The Charge Blade allows you to use the files you just dumped into charging either the sword, shield, or serve as ammunition for swinging around the axe, which is the bulk of what you'll be doing on this weapon. Axe mode is where you really pack a punch. You can totally play through the game just with the sword and shield mode if that's what you want, but it's not getting the full use out of the weapon for sure. See, if axe mode on Switch Axe is all about refilling your meter to get into sword mode, this weapon is the reverse, where you'll be charging your files to get into axe mode as often as possible. Axe mode can be used in a variety of ways, swinging it around normally, chainsaw mode, or dumping all of the files into a giant explosion. The giant explosion isn't bad, but I found more consistent hunts just by using my files for Savage Axe. Savage Axe is that chainsaw mode I was talking about earlier. To get to this state, all you have to do is either perfect guard a monster's attack, and then hit the attack button, or if you do the focus strike against a wound, even putting you directly in axe mode for free spins. Savage Axe reduces the amount of files you use while swinging it around, and it simplifies the gameplay loop in a way beginners can wrap their head around. After you get accustomed to this, I totally think it's worth experimenting with the sword and shield charge states to try out the other gameplay styles of the Charge Blade, but this is more than enough to get you started. If you want a weapon with a lot of depth, then this can feel like the gift that keeps on giving as you improve at using it and the different tools it provides. To reiterate, your goal is to get to Savage Axe, rev your chainsaw through monsters, and mow them down like there's no tomorrow. Sword attacks will charge your files. You can dump these into the shield by guarding and hitting the attack button. Then, if you get a perfect guard or perform a focus strike, you'll have access to Savage Axe mode that'll make short work of most things, plus it has great range to hit flyers or different parts of a monster. The true mastery of both morph weapons comes from optimal use of both sides of the weapon, knowing when to swap back into sword and shield form to either block attacks or refill your files, and using axe mode to dish out big damage. There is more to the Charge Blade than I covered here, but hopefully this is simple enough for a newcomer to pick it up and play. If not, hit me up in the comments below, and I'll try my best to reiterate it. If you were hoping for something simple after all that, then I'm sorry to disappoint, but next up is everyone's favorite aerial combatant, the Insect Glaive. The Insect Glaive's main appeal would be the fact that this weapon isn't just grounded like many of the other options available to you, but that you can traverse the skies and meet monsters on their own terms, whether they fly or are just massive. It can be used to dodge over moves or just hit monsters when they're not expecting it. Don't let this part fool you into thinking the grounded kit isn't worth using on the Insect Glaive though. There's so many good choices with this weapon that you really can't go wrong. It's very free flow, like in its combat style, so for the hunter that might enjoy a variety of options, I think this weapon would be right up your alley. The first thing I think most people will notice when it comes to the Insect Glaive is the giant bug that rests on your arm. This is your Kinsect. It's home to some unique attributes that would warrant a video on their own to explain, but basically this is like a little buddy you raise. They can come in a few different forms and have a ton of different stats, but you don't have to worry about all that at the start. One of the main differences being blunt or severing. A severing Kinsect can slice off monster parts and do more damage to those susceptible to blades, or you can opt in for a blunt one, allowing you to deal KO damage to a monster by hitting them in the head over and over. The Kinsect can do many different things, even fight with you while it's out. But the main thing to keep in mind is that this little guy can harvest buffs for you. By holding down the correct button, you'll get a reticle on your screen that allows you to aim where your Kinsect goes. Depending on where you're aiming, you'll see one of three different colors: white, orange, or red. Red lets you charge an alternate attack, white increases your movement speed and jump height, and orange will negate knockback while you have the weapon out. While it's nice to know these, it's not something you need to keep in the back of your mind the whole hunt, except for maybe the buff from the red extract, because it leads into one of your big finisher moves on the Insect Glaive. Each buff also has a combination effect. If you have red and white, you'll get an attack buff. Orange and white increases your defense. If you have all three buffs, red, white, and orange, You'll get a slew of buffs, you get some new moves, reduce the effects of wind pressure, tremors, and roars, and it gives you a bigger attack buff. Ideally, you'd like to be capped out at all 3 buffs at the same time, as this is where you're at your strongest with the Insect Glaive. And you also get access to this sick finisher. This weapon, while having access to the sky, you'll be doing more damage with grounded moves as these swing fast, often, and just do more damage than the one strike of the aerial mobility. So while that is a big part of the weapon, I'd use the aerial attacks to close the gap or avoid like a monster's fire breath or something in your way. Their other use lies in the fact that the aerial attacks can lead to easy mounts, which is a great way to knock the monster over and get free damage in. The Insect Glaive is a fast hitter that packs a punch and can make you feel like you're fighting alongside a partner, as your Kinsect will help you out throughout the hunt. If you don't like the idea of aiming the Kinsect from afar to gather your buffs, don't worry. Now you can just turn on focus mode, and as long as you're targeting different parts of the monster, you can get your buffs this way as well, giving the player a variety of options to mess around with. This weapon is highly mobile while delivering quick hits and even a little minigame to play during hunts for those of you with TikTok brain. It's an excellent option and very unique that should be on your radar. Alright, that's all of our melee weapons out of the way for this one. Next up are the ranged options, which admittedly I have much less time on in Monster Hunter as a whole. The bowguns being almost non-existent, as it's never really been my jam, but I can still give some pointers here and there on the things I do know and how they play. Starting with what might look like a long range weapon at first, is actually a super involved run and gun playstyle in the bow. This weapon is extremely aggressive with regular arrows, trackers that can stick to the monster, allowing you to set up some insane DPS windows, and coatings to bring along different options as you hunt, giving monsters a run for their money with all the different answers at your disposal. The bow is a weapon you want to still be close to the monster with, despite its range, as even though you can stand somewhat back and pelt away at a monster from the distance, you'll do more damage being closer and also being able to activate your discerning dodge. Similar to the dual blades' perfect dodge, hitting this dodge is pivotal to peak performance, as you'll be able to gather stamina back, which is huge for this weapon. Arrows can be charged up to 2 different levels. This can be seen by the little dots next to your reticle when you're aiming. Holding down shots though will drain your stamina fast, so it's important to be mindful of that while using this weapon. You can of course just not charge an arrow, but nobody wants to have periods of inactivity in their hunts. By getting good with the perfect dodge, here you can recover some stamina and keep up the oppression. The bow's new loop seems to revolve around tracer arrows, bolts that can get stuck in monsters, allowing you to capitalize on them later by firing multiple arrows into them at once, getting big damage off on a monster. The easiest way to get a few tracers stuck into the monster is by using your arc shot, a giant rain of arrows down on your target, with more tracers getting planted if you charge it up. Naturally, it might be kind of hard to get this off randomly in a hunt, so an easy way to go about it would be to either stun the monster with a status or knock it over for a bit. In the past, you probably needed good to decent aim to play the bow well, but in wilds you can actually alleviate bad aim with the new tracer arrows. Knocking one of these bad boys into a monster part allows all your arrows to fly directly there, so there's no missing due to bad aim or being unable to hit a certain part if you want to hit something else with this weapon. That is, if you can hit the first shot. It might sound like a lot, but the setup is pretty simple. Fire a tracer arrow into the part of the monster you either want to break or damage, then apply a coating of your choice and fire away. If the monster gets knocked down, we can go for an arc shot to load it up with tracer arrows, then profit with our new focus strike into a dragon piercer. This is the big boy arrow you'll be using to wake up hits or when you have a good opening, as the charge up can take a while. Overall, the bow is a very movement based weapon, having you dance around with your quick steps as the monster can't hit you while you're busy running circles around it, with your flashy attacks and different arrow coatings depending on the situation. There's a ton to this weapon, but just like the others, don't let that discourage you if you find it interesting. Just take it one step at a time, and this playstyle could be one you really love. Alright, the bowguns are definitely out of my depth, but if you really enjoy the gunner playstyle, you want to sit in the back or middle of a hunt and just lay down oppressive fire on the monster you're hunting, then these next two are for you. The light bowgun would be favored by those that enjoy being able to reposition at ease, which this weapon offers with a sidestep and slide after certain shots to get around the battlefield better. It's a weapon that lends itself well to a non-stop oppression, but can also bring along some ammo to buff teammates or even heal them, and yes, you can use this ammo on yourself just by shooting the floor. As you're putting shots into the monster, you'll notice your meter in the bottom right going up. This is the rapid fire mode. It does what it says and allows you to put shots into the monster faster than normal and a load heavy fire. best way to get into this mode is to finish up your shots with the chaser shot input. You'll have to time this just as the last shot ends to get it to work. The light bowgun specializes in doing good damage while always being on the move if needed, never standing still in one spot for too long, so you don't get clobbered by whatever you're fighting. It has access to the Wyvern Blast, a mine you can place on the ground and shoot to get it to explode, or adhesive ammo, a bullet that will stick into the monster and end up doing more damage if you attack the spot before it explodes. While this isn't necessarily my cup of tea, I can totally see somebody that wants a ton of options on a hunt with different ammo types and some good mobility to enjoy this weapon, especially for those that love the gunner fantasy.
Say hello to my little friend!
Muscle that monster.
The heavy bowgun is last, but certainly not least. If you ever felt like you needed a bigger gun,
Is this thing on? Am I all alone? Is anyone there? I need a bigger gun.
shout out to my Xenoblade fans, then the heavy bowgun is your one-stop shop for massive artillery. Being host to a plethora of different ammo types, just like the light bowgun, it's up to you to decide what's the best loadout to go into with a hunt, but hey, you can always just bring 2 bowguns with you to accommodate what one is lacking. Nothing stopping you there. The heavy bowgun has a noticeably slower fire rate than its counterpart, but what it lacks in heavy fire, it makes up for in heavy hits and specialized ammunition types like turning your weapon into a minigun, if it pleases you. This weapon is also host to a shield since it's not as mobile as the light bowgun, and yeah, you can perfect block with this too, leading into some juicy clashes. Each bowgun is host to 2 different special ammo types along with the coatings you bring with you, so it's up to you to decide what you want to use here. You could bring a bowgun with a Wyvern Heart ignition for faster fire, and Wyvern counter to try to go for some offset attacks on what you're fighting. A bullet that slowly pierces what you're fighting as you keep hitting it, and a mid-range blast to cover a wide area if you need it. The bowguns are all about their customizability and how you want to play them, so if you enjoy a more methodical style, where you're making decisions in and out of the hunt as much as possible, these bad boys might be to your liking. With that out of the way, that's every weapon in Monster Hunter Wilds. A brief overview of how you can play them, with some of my own pointers thrown in there for beginners. If you're an experienced hunter and just watching this for fun, by all means leave your tips in the comments below. I know I avoided the intricacies of many of the weapons, but that's by intention, as I do believe part of the fun is for the new hunters to figure out the best way to use things on their own and try to fly out of their nest. Each weapon has a ton of little details to take note of while you play, but that's way out of the scope of this video and would just make it way too long. Down the line, I will try to make a more detailed guide for each of the weapons I feel proficient in myself, but as for right now, this is just to get people started and hunting. The game allows you to bring 2 weapons per hunt, so hey, feel free to mix and match to your heart's content in case one playstyle isn't working. I hope you enjoyed the game, and if you found this video helpful, it'd mean the world to me if you'd subscribe. Stay safe out there, and thank you for your time, hunters. May I see you out in the wilds myself.